The pickup rolled to a stop in the heart of the Sonoran Desert, its engine coughing in the heat. When the tailgate dropped, Staff Sergeant Maya Torres hit the sand hard, wrists zip-tied, throat already dry from hours of silence. Cartel Lieutenant Rafael Vargas stood over her, boots sinking into the dune. "You, Delta Force," he sneered in thick, accented English. "Always so tough. Let's see how tough you are without water." He tossed 2 bottles into the sand, both landing just out of reach. The men laughed, a sharp, echoing sound swallowed quickly by the empty horizon. The sun hammered down, 116 degrees and climbing. The air shimmered like glass. The smell of burnt oil and dust mixed with sweat until breathing hurt. Maya said nothing. She marked the sun's angle, counted seconds between gusts, mapped distance by memory. Training over fear. Silence over weakness. Vargas spat near her boot. 2 days, soldier. Let's see if your army finds bones or nothing. He turned away. The desert swallowed the sound. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The desert had taken everything from her: gear, water, shade, but not memory. And in memory, Maya Torres was never just a soldier. She was a builder, piece by piece, of quiet strength. Tucson, Arizona. Long before she wore a uniform, she had grown up in the kind of dry heat that baked the color out of everything: pavement, paint, even patience. Her father, Miguel Torres, a retired Army Ranger, used to wake her before dawn to watch the sunrise crest the Catalina Mountains. He'd say, "The desert doesn't care how tough you think you are, kid. It teaches you how to be tough." He never raised his voice. Never needed to. Maya learned early that real authority didn't shout. It simply stood, and the room adjusted. Her mother had passed when she was 11. That left her, her father, and her younger sister Lena, a kid with sketchbooks full of stars and eyes too soft for the world they lived in. Maya worked double shifts through high school, part-time at a gas station, then nights as a volunteer EMT. It wasn't for money. It was for control. When she saw blood, she didn't flinch. When sirens wailed, she drove faster. It wasn't adrenaline. It was focus. At 19, she walked into a recruitment office with a backpack, a steady gaze, and the kind of silence that made the sergeant behind the desk look twice. "Family in the service?" he asked. She nodded. "Rangers," he grinned. "Then you already know the pain you're signing up for." Basic training was predictable: heat, fatigue, men louder than their experience. Maya never competed with volume. When the platoon raced, she came in third. When they marched, she carried extra gear. When others talked about quitting, she didn't talk at all. The drill instructors used to say, "Torres doesn't break. She waits for everyone else to." 2 years later, she volunteered for airborne school at Fort Benning. The instructors smirked when she stepped off the bus. Small frame, quiet voice, not what they expected from a paratrooper candidate. "Lightweight," one of them called. She just looked at him, nodded once, and said, "Yes, Sergeant." By the end of the first week, she was running extra jumps to help other trainees who froze mid-exit. Her canopy control was flawless. Not flashy, just disciplined. Every time her boots hit the ground, she'd whisper, "One more done." She never celebrated. Never complained. That rhythm became her heartbeat. Within 5 years, Sergeant Torres had moved through 2 combat tours, Afghanistan, then Iraq. Not as a frontline shooter, but as a communications specialist, the quiet link that kept command from chaos. Her teammates called her Raven. It wasn't about mystery. It was about reliability. Ravens don't get lost. They find their way back, no matter the storm. Raven didn't talk much, but she noticed everything. The cracked antenna on the JTAX radio before the mission. The slight delay in encryption signals when they crossed grid lines. The tremor in a medic's hands before a dawn patrol. She absorbed details like oxygen. Her watchband had tiny ink marks etched inside the leather, coordinates, survival headings, escape azimuths, each one smudged but memorized. Her issued kit always carried a small tuck knife, the kind with a handle worn smooth from use. She'd sharpen it once a week, methodically, like a prayer. And when briefing maps were laid out, she was the one who smoothed their corners flat before folding them with surgical precision. North up, creases perfect. Her squadmates used to tease, "Raven, you iron those maps too?" She'd smirk. "Only if you want them to fit in your pocket." What set her apart wasn't just discipline, it was restraint. When others lost temper or swaggered loud, Maya stayed level. In firefights, she was the calmest voice on comms. When a Humvee flipped after hitting an IED, she was the one crawling into smoke to pull out the driver, eyes stinging, orders clear. And yet, despite it all, she was constantly underestimated. Some saw her height first, not her rank. Some saw the plain brown eyes, not the 10 years of service behind them. Even in joint operations, where she wore plain civilian clothes to blend in with intelligence teams, people assumed she was support staff. Logistics, admin, anyone but combat trained. It didn't offend her, it focused her. She knew something most didn't. Underestimation is camouflage. There was one night, months before the desert, that her composure became legend among her unit. A green recruit, Private Huxley, was assigned to her comms section. First mission in a forward operating base near Kandahar. Nerves everywhere. Radios jamming, mortar rounds echoing just outside the wire. Huxley's hand shook as he fumbled with a frequency switch. Maya slid beside him, calm as midnight rain. "Hey," she said quietly, "you breathe first, fix later." He blinked, startled. "What if we lose the link?" She took the handset, adjusted the knob 3 clicks right, and the channel came alive, a pilot's voice cutting through static. "There," she said, "now we don't lose anything." Later, when the lieutenant asked who stabilized the net, Huxley pointed at her. "Raven did," he said. "She didn't even look scared." Maya only smiled. Wasn't time to be. Not long after, a black envelope came down the chain. Invitation-only selection, not a school. Not a posting. A test. 3 words printed at the top, assessment and selection. She didn't talk about it. She packed light, left her sister a voicemail. "Be good, Lena. I'll be back when I can," and disappeared for 4 months. When she returned, her uniform bore no new insignia, but the men who'd been through it with her knew what that silence meant. The ones who hadn't, didn't ask. One of them, a captain, caught her in the mess hall after and said quietly, "You made it, didn't you?" She just raised an eyebrow. He nodded. "Yeah. Thought so." From that day, nobody called her Sergeant Torres unless it was official. To her team, she was Raven, the woman who never cracked, never bragged, never broke. Years later, when the mission in northern Mexico began, a quiet, joint operation to extract a kidnapped American advisor, Maya had already been serving over a decade. Her movements were instinct. Her discipline automatic. Her belief simple: no one is coming to save you. You save each other. And that belief was about to be tested in ways even she hadn't imagined. If you've ever seen someone quietly outwork everyone, drop a salute in the comments. Sometimes the loudest kind of courage doesn't make a sound. The convoy rolled south along a washboard track that locals called a road only because maps needed a name. 2 unmarked SUVs up front, a beat-up Tacoma carrying a spare wheel and water cans behind, and a Land Cruiser with Maya in the rear seat, windows dusty, air thick with heat. They had planned it simple. Slip in before noon, extract a kidnapped American advisor from a safe house near a dry riverbed, and slip out before the afternoon thermals turned the sky to boiling glass. No banners, no heroics, no signatures. Maya rode silent, headset snug, eyes on a fold-creased map balanced on her knee. She traced a finger along a pencil line, a narrow culvert, a cattle gate, then a fork where the road pinched into thorn scrub. 2 minutes to Chill Point, the driver murmured. Up ahead, smoke bled across the track. At first it looked like brush fire. Then the shapes resolved, 3 tires burning in a stagger, and a rust-eaten sedan angled across the path. "Roadblock," the lead SUV called. "We go through?" "Negative," the team leader said. We push left through the wash, bypass, slow and smart. Maya felt the hairs at her neck lift. Burning tires were theater. The real threat sat where no one looked. "Pause," she said quietly. "Check the culvert 10 meters short." "That dirt's too fresh." The driver braked. Dust surged past like surf. Through the windshield, Maya watched a strip of road that had been tamped smooth by a hand, not wind. Her thumb brushed the inside of her watchband, a tiny inked azimuth in the word covert. "Back it up," she said, slowly. They'd moved 3 meters when the world punched them. A pressure blast lifted the front SUV as if a giant hand swatted it. The windshield burst into glitter. The Tacoma fishtailed, smashing its tailgate into a mesquite trunk. Maya's head snapped against the headrest. The radio on her chest coughed static. "Contact, contact front, brake, brake," someone shouted. Then the guns opened. A long, stitched growl from the right, heavier than AK. RPK, maybe PKM, belt-fed. The roadblock had been bait. The real ambush sat L-shaped, down in the arroyo to their right and along a berm on their left, waiting to rake the kill zone flat. "Smoke out," the team leader barked. White clouds burst from grenades and hung useless in the heat. Maya's world narrowed to 3 facts. Left shooters high behind tires, right shooters low in the wash, and the culvert charge had pulsed from a wired trigger, not a remote, because the pop had come too fast after their break. She shouldered the Land Cruiser door and dropped to the sand. Heat slapped, grit stung her teeth. "Comms check," she said into the mic. "Hux, status. Hit. I'm hit," Corporal Huxley rasped. "Left forearm. I can still work." "Stay with me," Maya said. "Push our traffic to backup net. Encryption might be compromised." Bullets clipped dry grass near her boot. Someone down in the wash saw her headset and stitched a line to cut the brain out of the body. She crawled behind a wheel rut, rolled to a knee, and looked once. Quick, not greedy. 10, maybe 12 shooters total. 2 vehicles behind them that hadn't been there a minute ago. A Hilux and a Silverado, high racks mounted in their beds. Left berm. 2 with belts, she called. Right wash, 3 with rifles, 1 spotter. The team leader tried to push the lead SUV. It groaned, radiator hissing. A second blast chewed the road where their rear tires had been seconds before. Not as strong, more a denial charge than a kill. They were pinned. Voices jabbered in rapid Spanish from the berm. Then something new, a clipped English voice on their frequency that did not belong. U.S. "Soldiers," it said, cheerful as a radio host, "drop your weapons and step out. We only want to talk." Maya felt cold despite the heat. They weren't jamming. They'd stolen a handset and were walking into their net. She flipped to backup and keyed twice, the pre-briefed signal that said comms integrity compromised. Nothing came back but static and breath. "Raven," the team leader said, closer now, his sleeve dark with someone's blood. "We need out," she scanned. Left flank too high, right wash too deep, the rear now blocked by the Tacoma cranked sideways. Their only exit lay through the arroyo. "On me," she said. They moved, crouched and tight, a 3-man element toward the wash. Rounds hummed low, angry hornets. Maya counted rhythm. 3-second bursts, 4-second pause, belt change at 16. She popped smoke into the wash and dropped after it, landing hard on her palms, sand scraping skin. For a heartbeat, the world muted. Smoke, grit, a drop of blood bright on the back of her hand. Then a shape rushed the smoke at her, a man with a bandana and a short rifle. He saw the small soldier, not the operator. He leaned in to grab. Her elbow flashed, a compact practice strike that jammed his gun across his own chest. Her boot found his knee, sent him folding. She did not finish him. Time meant life. "Hux, crawl," she said. "Stay in the ribbon." They slid 30 meters along the wash and were almost to a dip when the Silverado dropped in above them and braced its wheels at the lip, chewing dirt. Muzzles winked. "Back!" Maya shouted. A rope snaked down from the truck bed. Not rescue. A drag. Hands yanked it. Maya twisted, kicked, grabbed for Hux. Too slow. The rope cinched his boot and ripped him forward into the open like a fish on a line. "No!" Maya lunged, fingers grazing his pant leg. Rounds cracked around them. She let him go. It was the hardest decision of her life. Gunfire ebbed, replaced by shouts. Dark shapes fanned around the wash. 3 rifles pressed down on Maya, 2 more on the teen leader. Hux lay face down, dust kicking to blood on his forearm. He twitched and tried to roll. A boot pinned him. "Drop," someone said. "Drop your gear now." Maya set her rifle down slowly. She could feel the heat of the metal through her glove. Her fingers wanted to clench, to fight now and die now. She didn't let them. They zip-tied her wrists, yanked off her headset, and kicked her to her knees. The men's faces were sunburnt and young. Their laughter was older. A man with mirrored sunglasses crouched to peer into her eyes. "Gringuita," he said lightly, "you speak?" She didn't answer. He plucked her name tape free and flicked it into the sand. Another tore her rank. A third found her dog tags, tugged, and when they wouldn't break, cut the chain and tossed the tags into the brush. "Delta," a fourth said, tasting the word, "like the movie." "You do karate, yes? You jump from helicopters?" Laughter popped like oil in a pan. A boot nudged her shoulder. "Where is your bravery now?" Another pointed at her build and smirked. "So small, not scary." "We thought soldiers were big." A young gunman with a skull tattoo leaned in until she could smell stale cigarette on his breath. "You know how this goes," he said. "We ask, you tell. Or we teach you to tell." Maya looked at him and said nothing. She didn't drop her gaze. She didn't rise to the bait. Her pulse slowed, not spiked. They took her plate carrier, sidearm, radio, GPS. They stripped her of the things that made modern war feel safe. The humiliation came in layers, not just theft, but performance. One of them held up her tuck knife and wagged it as if she'd given him a toy prize. Another pretended to read her folded map, upside down, the crowd howling. They pushed Hux under the truck's shadow and tied a strip of cloth around his arm, tight and clumsy. He groaned, eyes fluttering. "Raven," he whispered hoarsely. I'm sorry." She shook her head once. "Stay awake," she said softly. "You hear me? Stay awake." The lieutenant arrived last, as men like him do, only when the show had been staged. Clean boots, cool smile, a pistol that had never jammed because someone else cleaned it. "American soldiers," he said in practiced English. "Welcome to Sonora." He studied Maya. "No," he corrected himself. "American, what is the word?" "Special." "Elite." He rolled the syllable like a grape on his tongue. "Delta." He squatted and looked her over like a mechanic appraising a part. "You look ordinary," he said, almost disappointed. "I thought the best were tall." "With big muscles, like on Netflix." The men chuckled. He glanced toward the road where the lead SUV still smoked. "Your radio," he said. "It speaks Spanish now. We borrowed the voice." He smiled. "You will tell us what we want. Then maybe we let you sleep in the shade." He snapped his fingers. 2 men dragged Maya by the elbows to the bed of the Hilux. They dumped her like a sack. A third climbed in and planted a boot on her shoulder to keep her still. She lifted her head, found Hux's eyes beneath the truck. He was pale. She held his gaze. "Breathe," she mouthed. "In," she mouthed. "Out," the lieutenant signaled. Engines coughed alive. The little convoy turned its nose east, toward the hazy cut of low mountains where their compound squatted. The drive burned. Heat smashed through the wind. Grit rasped in her teeth. They jeered to fill the miles. "Hey, Delta," one said, "you fly drones from your bedroom?" Another waggled her dog tags, then tossed them into the desert like confetti. A third leaned close and tapped her on the forehead, hollow. Nothing inside. None of it landed. She had heard worse in quieter rooms from men who wore uniforms and never bled. She counted time instead. Truck speed at 40, sometimes 50. A hard turn left after 23 minutes. A creek bed crossed at 27, tires smashing dry stone. A lone saguaro with a broken arm at 39. She drew the map in her mind and stored it with the rest. At the compound, brick walls rose from dust. A corrugated gate screamed on tired hinges. Children of men flicked cigarette butts and stared. Dogs barked, and then, reading something in the air, went silent. They dragged the captives into a courtyard where a tarp had been strung for shade. They separated Maya. They let Huck slump against a wall. They set a plastic chair beside him, as if mercy could be furniture. An older man with a scar through his eyebrow stepped forward with a notepad. Names, he said. Units. Frequencies. How many more coming? He spoke Spanish and waited like he expected her to answer in it. Maya inhaled once. Her wrists hurt under the ties. She let the pain be. No, she said simply, in English. The first slap took her by surprise only because it was lazy. He did not hit like a soldier. He hit like a man who thought violence itself did the work. She tasted copper and counted. Try again, he said. She didn't. They removed her blouse and checked for tattoos that might tell a story. They found the tiny raven silhouette behind her left ear. The older man snorted. Ah, he said. A little bird. It flies home, one of the younger ones said, amused. Another mimed wings and cackled until someone more serious glared him quiet. They filmed it, the questions, the silence, for their own theater. Maya watched the lens. She didn't let hate sharpen her eyes. She let emptiness float there. When they tired of silence, they changed targets. They crouched near Hux and asked him for anything, everything, in a tone that offered relief as if kindness could be currency. He tried to say nothing. Pain unraveled the edges of his no. Hey, Maya said, voice low and steady, cutting across their questions like a metronome. Breathe, Hux. That's an order. He latched onto the words like a drowning man to a rope. The lieutenant drifted back in, bored of other things. He tipped his head. You look like you know how long a man lasts out here, he said, stepping toward Maya. In the sun, with no water. He smiled. We will find out. He gave a small gesture with his hand. Two men hauled Maya to her feet. She stumbled, knees soft from hours on the ground, and then made her legs aframe again. They walked her past a table where someone had cleaned a rifle and left the bolt wrong. Past a wall where a map hung upside down with thumbtacks scattered like flies. Past a corner where a radio sat tuned to a frequency she knew by heart. She didn't deviate. She didn't grab. She learned. Outside the gate, the sun felt like punishment. The lieutenant pointed at the horizon, miles of nothing that shimmered with heat. 80 kilometers, he said pleasantly. Civilization, if you can call it that. He nodded at the guard. Give her a head start, he said, almost kindly. Then we see how far she crawls. They tossed her into the bed of a pickup and drove until the compound shrank to a smudge. They stopped where the land opened like a mouth. He tossed 2 water bottles into the sand, just out of reach, the way cruel men do when they want to tell themselves a story about fairness. He looked down at her. You, Delta Force, he said, teeth bright in the glare. Let's see how tough you are without water. The men laughed. It sounded hollow in the bright. They cut the ties at her ankles and left the wrists. They drove away in a spray of grit. Silence slammed down. The desert did what it always does. It ignored her. Maya rolled to her side, spat dust, and listened to the engines fade. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then she drew her knees under her and sat up. Her mind moved, quiet and precise, sun at high angle, slightly west. Estimate, mid-afternoon. Peak heat still ahead. She cataloged the terrain. Low creosote, scattered ocotillo, a dry draw slanting south like a line in the palm of a hand. She checked her wrists. The zip tie bit deep. Her pulse beat against plastic. She didn't fight it. Not yet. She closed her eyes and breathed once, slow, the way she had taught Hux. She opened them and looked east toward the mountains and the compound that held her team. What would you do if you were in Maya's boots? Would you run blind and die proud? Would you fold and beg and die slow? Maya did what Delta Selection teaches in its first unspoken lesson. She chose the third thing. She slid on her side until the backs of her shoulders rested against the hottest part of the sand. Heat bit, then steadied. She inched her wrists along the grit, sawing plastic against quartz until she felt a scratch catch and the tie drag a fraction. Not panic. Process. A vulture wheeled high, black against hard blue. The horizon wavered. She licked her lips, tasted dust, and smiled without humor. "They think I'm alone," she whispered. She tilted her head, studied the pattern of wind on sand, and marked a faint seam, the line where night would curl cool into the gulch. She had hours to burn and one plan to build. Tell us, would you try to fight back immediately or wait for a smarter move? Comment below. The first hour alone taught Maya that silence could scream. Every breath rasped against dry air that tasted of salt and copper. Yet beneath the heat haze and thirst, her mind stayed methodical. She crawled toward the low draw that cut through the desert like a scar. There, under the thin shade of a creosote bush, she paused to breathe, slow and measured. Her wrists throbbed where the zip tie dug grooves into the skin. She rotated them a fraction, feeling the plastic heat, memorizing its give. As she shifted, the wind brushed back a strand of hair. For a second, the tiny raven tattoo behind her left ear caught the light. She touched it once, lightly, almost without thinking. The ink had been earned years ago on a freezing night in the Carolina pines, the end of a selection phase where 20 had started and 6 had finished. The instructors had told them, "You're not immortal. You're adaptable." That memory, small and dark as the tattoo itself, steadied her. She scanned the horizon again. Heat shimmer bent the line of mountains, tricking distance into mirage. Somewhere east, a faint black dot moved, the cartel truck returning to its compound. She noted its bearing and filed it away. Her throat burned. She dug her fingers into the sand, found it still damp an inch below the surface. She pressed that moisture against her tongue. Bitter, metallic, but enough to tell her which direction the water table leaned. When she shifted her right arm, a faint sting lit along the forearm. The skin there carried a faded scab, puckered and white. 2 years earlier, a survival dive in frigid water had nearly killed her. She'd lost consciousness beneath ice, saved only because a teammate yanked her free by the harness. The wound never healed clean, and the scar reminded her what panic cost. Now she traced it, the pulse beneath skin slowing back to rhythm. She used the memory like a switch, fear off, focus on. She turned her body sideways to the sun, studying how her shadow shortened. She estimated 1 hour until peak, 3 until decline, enough to move at dusk. Enough to live. Her fingertips brushed her pants pocket, and there it was, the thing they had missed. A folded photograph, edges soft and sand-worn. She unfolded it carefully. Lena, her younger sister, smiling in a cheap graduation gown, a desert flower pinned to her hair. Behind her, the bleachers of a Tucson high school. Maya exhaled. "Still waiting for me to come home, huh?" she murmured. The paper trembled in the wind. She refolded it, tucked it deep again, a tiny anchor to a world where people laughed under blue skies. Far off, engines coughed. A thin dust column rose, the cartel returning to check the kill zone, maybe scavenge equipment. She flattened herself and let the bush cover her outline. A voice drifted across the air, Spanish, half sung, half shouted. Then silence again. Minutes later, boots crunched. 2 guards, just kids, sweeping the area. They weren't careful, they were bored. One carried a small speaker on his hip, playing ranchera music through static. The other hummed a soldier's cadence under his breath, wrong tempo, lazy rhythm. When they paused near her bush, Maya began to hum too so soft, it barely carried, yet patterned. A 6-count marching cadence in a border dialect of Spanish, one used in Delta Sear E escape drills years ago. Each phrase encoded a simple message. Direction. East. Safe. Nightfall. One of the guards tilted his head, frowning. "Did you hear something?" he asked. The other laughed. "Just the wind, hermano. Even the ghosts hum here." They moved on. Maya kept the tune going until the sound of the truck swallowed it. Somewhere beyond hearing, a captured ally might pick it up later. Or maybe not. Either way, she had left a mark, an invisible flare of intention. She let her body sink into stillness again, rationing motion the way others rationed water. Every few minutes, she flexed fingers to keep blood moving, tapping a slow code against the zip tie. Patience, timing patience. The desert answered with heat and cicadas. By late afternoon, the light turned copper. Shadows stretched long across the flats. Maya watched them like clock hands. When one shadow touched the edge of her makeshift trench, she whispered, "Move." She rolled to her knees, braced her wrists against a stone edge, and twisted. The plastic creaked but held. She repositioned, rubbed the tie against a quartz shard again. Another millimeter gave. Sweat dripped from her chin and hissed on the rock. She paused, forcing a breath. Her chest ached from shallow breathing. A flash memory surfaced, the instructor's voice during selection week. When you think you're dying, count 4 things you can see, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, 1 you can control. She obeyed. She saw the sun bleeding toward horizon, the glint of distant metal, her own knees caked in dust, a single hawk circling high. She touched sand, stone, plastic. She smelled heat, sweat, oil. And she controlled herself. The tie finally snapped with a dry pop. Relief didn't flood her. She simply flexed fingers once, testing joints. Then she rubbed her wrists until feeling returned. No blood, only swelling. She scavenged the ground for anything usable. A sharp tin scrap, maybe from the truck's tailgate, went into her pocket. A boot track showed tread heading northeast. She memorized pattern and direction. It would help at night. Dusk crawled in. She rose slowly, stretching cramped legs. Her knees trembled once, then steadied. The desert cooled by degrees. Each breath hurt less. She started east, following the faint dip of the land. Every few steps, she paused, listening. Night birds began to stir. The sound meant insects nearby, water not far. A distant dog barked. Voices echoed thinly. The cartel, miles behind, laughing over something unseen. The world felt both infinite and fragile. She walked until the first star appeared. Then she crouched under an overhang of rock and sat. For the first time since capture, she allowed herself to whisper into the darkness. "You were wrong, Lieutenant," she said softly. Delta doesn't teach us to be tough. It teaches us not to quit. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and mesquite. Somewhere to the south, a faint rhythmic thump repeated, too even for random sound. Maybe a generator. Maybe a heartbeat of the place she had to reach. She pressed her palm to her ear, feeling the tiny raven shape there, warm from the day's sun. Each clue she carried, the tattoo, the scar, the photograph, wasn't decoration. They were reminders of process, of reasons to endure. When fatigue threatened to pull her down, she took out the photo again. She let the fading light outline Lena's smile and whispered, "Still watching the sunrise for me, kid?" Then she tucked it away, stood, and began moving toward the mountains. The desert around her glowed dull silver, alive with unseen motion. Coyotes barked far off. The horizon pulsed with hidden fire. She walked into it, a ghost made of patience. The desert night had teeth. By midnight, the temperature had fallen from burning to bone-cutting cold, and every breath Maya drew felt like inhaling glass. Her wrists were raw, the freed skin bright against the starlight. But pain meant life, she reminded herself of that with every movement. She'd freed one hand. It wasn't victory. It was permission to think bigger. She lay flat in the hollow of a wash, the kind carved by flash floods that came once a year and then vanished. Sand gritted her teeth, stuck to her sweat-soaked collar. She flexed her right hand, the one she'd freed by pulling a single thread from the hem of her uniform. A fine, sharp filament she'd once used to repair comm wires in the field. Wrapped around her finger, it had sliced through the plastic tie, grain by grain, until she'd heard the faintest snap. She didn't move immediately. Movement got you killed. Stillness let you think. The stars above were hard points of ice. She could make out the Big Dipper, the faint smear of the Milky Way, and, low on the horizon, the dim flicker of orange. Campfire. The cartel compound. 80 kilometers. She repeated it in her head like a march cadence. At dawn, the wind shifted again. The heat returned faster than she expected, a reminder that rest here was theft. You stole it in slivers, and the desert always noticed. Maya checked her pocket again. The folded photograph of Lena was still there, edges curled, her sister's smile ghost-like now under a smear of dust. She tucked it away, the motion automatic. Habit replaced comfort. When she rose to her knees, she scanned the horizon with slow precision. The ground shimmered, but the patterns of shadow and dune told her something. Under the far ridge, the sand compacted darker. Harder soil. That meant there had once been water there, maybe an old wash line that still held morning dew or sparse mesquite. Her lips cracked when she smiled. Dew meant life. Life meant movement. But she wasn't the only one breathing this desert. Near sunrise, the distant sound of an engine broke the quiet. It wasn't the deep growl of a convoy, it was a lighter, higher-pitched rattle. A dirt bike, maybe two. Patrol. She flattened herself into the wash, pressing her cheek into cool grit. The bikes grew louder, the engines hiccuping through gears, bouncing over the dunes. Then silence. She heard laughter and the thump of boots. The guards weren't searching. They were bored. Killing time on rotation. They stopped near the old truck she'd been dumped from. She could hear their voices through the stillness. Spanish laced with that border slang she'd learned years ago. One of them kicked the tailgate. Still here? Guess the birds ate her. The other laughed. Or she dug herself into the sand. The first dropped into the bed, rattling metal. Something fell. A piece of equipment, heavy, solid. A radio. Its casing dented but still intact. Maya's heart ticked once. She waited. The men climbed out, cursing at the heat, then started their bikes again and roared away in a spray of dust. When the sound faded, she moved. The radio lay half-buried near the wheel track. She slid toward it on her elbows, every shift of her body deliberate, silent. She reached out, pulled it close, brushed off the sand. The casing was cracked, the antenna gone, but the power light still flickered faint red when she pressed the toggle. She turned the volume dial. Static whispered, faint but alive. Then she flipped the frequency knob one notch at a time, listening for any fragment that might be her team. Nothing. Only the hiss of endless airwaves. Her fingers tightened. She knew she couldn't transmit. There'd be no range, no line of sight, and any attempt might alert the wrong ears. But Delta training wasn't about talking louder. It was about saying more with less. She picked up a shard of metal from the truck's fender, a triangle of rusted chrome. Using its edge, she tapped twice on the radio's casing, then 3 quick taps on the truck bed, then 1 long scrape. Tap, 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 tap. Scrape. To anyone else, it was nothing but the wind playing with junk. To anyone who'd survived Delta selection, it was a prearranged signal pattern. SERE code. Alive. Eastbound. Tracking. She did it again, slower, embedding it in the steel. Then she waited. Half a kilometer away at the compound, the faint metallic echo carried, just enough for a guard to pause mid-cigarette and glance toward the dunes. "Escuchaste eso?" he muttered. His partner shrugged. Probably the wind. This place makes noises. But the lieutenant, inside the compound, noticed the tension ripple through his men. "Check it," he ordered lazily. "If it's nothing, you run laps." The guards grumbled, but obeyed. 2 of them grabbed rifles and started out toward the wash. Maya saw their silhouettes crest the ridge. 2 figures, rifles slung low, casual. She didn't panic. Instead, she shifted her position slightly, pressing her freed hand into the sand and dragging her other, still-bound wrist close enough to reach the edge of the quartz shard she'd hidden. A small movement. One goal, finish what she'd started. The zip tie snapped just as the first guard shouted, "Nada aquí!" Maya froze, wrist free. The men scanned lazily, then turned back, their laughter fading with the crunch of boots. She let her body relax only when they disappeared over the rise, her breath left in a silent exhale. With both hands free, she moved fast. First priority, shade. Using the truck's broken tailgate and a sheet of half-buried tarp, she created a shallow lean-to against the wind. Under it, the temperature dropped enough to breathe again. Then she turned to her next task, the wounded. Through her binocular focus, she'd seen movement near the compound earlier. A flash of uniformed tan under the tarp by the fence. Hux. If he was still alive, she had to reach him. But charging back blind would undo everything. She spent an hour crawling the wash, tracing how the sand packed. Where it felt firmest under her palm, she found cracked salt and bits of dry reed, the ghost of a water channel. That meant dew at dawn. She marked the spot with 3 stones shaped like an arrow. Navigation doesn't need GPS, she muttered. Just pattern. When night came again, she moved back toward the compound perimeter. Her stomach ached from emptiness. Her throat was parchment, but her head stayed clear. She remembered the map she'd built in her mind. The left wall broken, a small outbuilding near the generator shed, a dog tethered near the east gate. The dog was her biggest threat. Noise, not bullets, betrayed you first. So she crouched 50 meters out, crouching low behind a mesquite bush, and waited until the wind carried from the opposite direction. When it did, she slid forward inch by inch, using the dips in the terrain as cover. Every sound mattered, the hum of the generator, the murmur of voices, the creak of a chair. Her pulse matched the rhythm. Then, luck. A distracted guard left his post to argue over a radio call. His rifle hung loose, safety off. He dropped a map as he turned, a folded sheet that fluttered against the sand. Maya moved before thought caught up. She crawled, snatched the map, and froze as a cigarette ember arced through the dark, landing yards from her. The guard cursed softly, too drunk to notice. She unfolded the paper under the moonlight. It wasn't detailed, but it showed what mattered: routes, supply convoys, water caches. And at the top corner, a note in crude Spanish, well 3, active. A water source. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't just escape now, it was survival, maybe even rescue. She memorized every mark, every contour, then tucked the paper inside her boot. Back at her lean-to, she sat cross-legged and listened to the desert breathe. The compound glowed faintly in the distance. Occasionally, a single shot echoed, aimless guards showing off to each other. But inside that noise, she heard something else, a rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Pause, tap. Her breath caught. It wasn't random. Someone was answering. She leaned forward, straining. The pattern repeated, fainter now but deliberate. It was Delta's variant of Morse, received. Hold position. Hux was alive. Maybe not alone. Maya pressed her forehead to the rusted fender, whispering a thank you into the metal. Hours later, just before dawn, she worked. Using her knife shard, she cut strips from the tarp and wrapped her wrists, part bandage, part disguise. The rest of the tarp she tore into cords. She used one to drag the radio under the shade, then stripped its wire coil. She wrapped the coil around a steel peg from the truck's frame. Improvised antenna. She couldn't broadcast far, but if her timing matched the convoy frequency she'd overheard earlier, maybe, just maybe, the Americans monitoring border chatter would catch the distortion. She twisted the knob to 4018-5700, tapped the casing again, Raven alive. Delta Code 8, North, East. Static hissed. No reply. She tried again. Tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Scrape. Somewhere miles away, a satellite feed might flicker. Or not. It didn't matter. The act itself mattered. That's what survival training drilled into you, signal even when no one listens. Because silence kills faster than bullets. As the first light bled across the horizon, a shout cracked from the compound. Guards ran toward the perimeter, rifles up. A truck started, revving hard. Maya crouched low, heart steady but mind racing. Something had spooked them. She didn't know the full chain yet, but her small axe had built it. The missing map, the echoing taps, the unease in their ranks. Someone thought a rescue force was near. She could almost hear her instructor's voice again. Small moves make big ripples, Raven. Don't aim to win. Aim to tilt the board. The board was tilting now. Through her binocular vision, she saw the lieutenant pacing, shouting orders, waving his pistol. He pointed toward the east hills, the same direction she'd mapped as her route. Perfect. While his men ran that way, she slipped the other. By midday, she was 5 kilometers from the compound. Every muscle burned. She paused only once, kneeling beside a patch of cracked earth where the night's dew had pooled in tiny drops along the roots of mesquite. She pressed her bandaged hand to the dirt, scooped what she could into her mouth. It wasn't water. It was salvation. From that vantage, she saw the smoke column twisting above the compound. Confusion. Fear. She had become their ghost story, and in that chaos maybe, just maybe, her team would get a window to break free. She touched the raven tattoo once more, eyes half closed. Lesson 1, she whispered. Never waste pain. Then she turned east, into the glare, carrying only a map, a shard of metal, and the sound of the signal still echoing in her head. Did you see how she used nothing to make something happen? Night came down like a curtain, heavy and deliberate. Heat bled from the ground in waves. In the distance, the cartel compound glowed dull amber, a cluster of lights in an ocean of dark. Maya slid along the spine of a low ridge until she could see over the wall. She lay on her stomach, chin in sand, rifle absent, breath measured. She didn't need a weapon to change a room. She needed timing. Inside, a generator coughed. A radio scratched. Men argued in half whispers, the bravado of daylight muted to the practical fear of night. A dog lifted its head, ears pricked, then tucked its muzzle back under a paw. Even the dog had learned silence. Maya tracked the patrol pattern. 2 men at the east gate, 1 lazy loop along the wall every 7 minutes, a smoker who wandered to the same corner and flicked ash like a lighthouse signal. On the 3rd cycle, she moved. She ghosted down the slope, keeping the mesquite between herself and the light. She reached the wall's shadow and put her back to the rough brick. Her fingers found a chipped vertical seam, a foothold. She breathed once and went up, a slow, quiet rise until her eyes just cleared the lip. The courtyard below had shifted since daylight. A folding table now sat beneath the tarp. A laptop. A scuffed PDA cabled to a portable drive. The older interrogator was there, the one with the scarred brow, scrolling through files with a clumsy hand. Beside him, Lieutenant Vargas paced, the same lazy smile stretched too thin. "Where are the others?" the older man said without looking up. "In the shed," Vargas replied. "They say nothing." "The girl? She is? How do they say?" "A problem for tomorrow." The older man clicked a file. The laptop screen flashed a grid of thumbnails. Photos. Names. Briefs in English and Spanish. He leaned closer. There, a candid shot taken at some dusty airstrip years ago. A woman in a camouflage cap, face half-shadowed, mouth relaxed, eyes unreadable. On the brim, someone had scrawled a call sign in Sharpie, Raven. The older man stilled. His finger hovered over the trackpad. "Aspera," he whispered. "Wait." Vargas stopped pacing. "What?" The older man turned the laptop so the light hit the photo full. Lines around his eyes deepened. He had the look of a man who had survived one too many rumors. "I know this story," he said softly. "Not from TV. From men. Contractors. They spoke about a woman who passed a certain selection, then disappeared. Not dead. Not alive. Just gone where men like us do not go." He tapped the screen. "This is her." Vargas laughed, but the sound died halfway. His eyes flicked reflexively to the wall, to the dark beyond the lights. "You are saying, what? She is some kind of myth?" The older man didn't answer. He clicked another image. A grainy still from a drone feed. A woman dragging a wounded soldier behind a burned-out vehicle, her body shielded by smoke. No face, just motion. Below, the caption, Raven activity unconfirmed. A murmur went around the yard. Cigarettes slowed. Boots stopped scuffing the dust. Men who'd done violence for a living looked at a small rectangle of light and saw something they did not control. At the far side of the yard, under a corrugated awning, Hux lay against a post, eyes half closed. He heard the word like a rope thrown across water. Raven. He swallowed, blood tacky at his lip. His fingers twitched once. He turned his head toward the gate, toward the night. "Raven," he whispered, a breath more than a sound. "She's here." No one heard him but himself. It was enough. On the wall, Maya held the edge of brick and watched the recognition spread like a slow fire. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She let the room teach itself. The older man dragged a hand over his jaw. He lowered his voice as if speaking of a superstition. "There is a thing they say in the North," he told Vargas without looking up, "about their selection. It breaks you, then it builds the part that does not break again." Vargas flicked his gaze at the gate a second time. The smile faltered. "Stories," he said. He tried for a shrug and found only a shiver. From the shadows by the shed, one of the mercenaries stepped closer. Older than the rest, foreign. His gear didn't match the cartel's piecemeal loadouts. He had the stance of a man who had been trained to stand. He took a slow breath, eyes on the laptop, then on the wall. "I saw her once," he said. His accent hinted at Eastern Europe. Coast, years back. "Dust storm so bad you could drink the air. We heard rumors of a woman who got a team out when everything went to hell. They said she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The men around her, they just moved." The yard tightened. The dog stood now, hackles up but silent. Vargas forced a laugh a third time, and the sound fractured like glass. "You are afraid of a ghost?" he said. "Very good. Then the ghost can answer questions in the morning." He turned to the shed to signal an underling. He never finished the gesture. A pebble ticked off the metal roof of the outbuilding. Then another. Small, nothing, unless you knew to listen. Tap, 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 tap. Scrape. The mercenary's head snapped toward the gate. His face went still. He breathed one word in a language no one else there knew. It meant incoming truth. Maya slid down to the ground outside the wall and moved to the gate's hinge line where shadow pooled darkest. Through the slats, she saw the whole scene, men stuck between laughter and legend. She stepped into the light like it wasn't there. No shout, no sprint. Just a single pace into the threshold so that when the mech's guard turned, he saw her in profile. Dust on her face, hair tucked, wrists wrapped in torn tarp, eyes level. The cigarette in his mouth paused mid-arc. His jaw didn't close. The ember fell and died. Maya didn't look at him. She looked past him, through him, to the lieutenant. Vargas, midway to a command, froze, the gesture collapsing at the elbow, his mouth opened. The part of his face that did most of his talking suddenly forgot how. He stared at her like a man seeing a shape in fog resolve into something with a name he'd mocked and now believed. No one spoke. Even the generator seemed to wait. A single dog barked once, and then, as if corrected by an invisible hand, stopped. Maya didn't raise her chin. She didn't flash a patch or spit a speech. She let the tiny raven tattoo behind her left ear catch the light for half a second as she turned her head. That was all. The older mercenary drew in air like a man who'd been underwater too long. He set his rifle's muzzle toward the ground. Not surrender, not threat, a soldier's neutral. He nodded once, small, to a truth only he and a few others in that yard could see. Vargas swallowed, his pistol lowered from habit, not intent. He forced sound through a dry throat. "You," he said. "You are." The older interrogator saved him from finishing. He closed the laptop with a gentle click, like putting a lid on a story that had become too real to read aloud. We should not make jokes any more, he said quietly. A breeze cut the courtyard. Ash skittered across concrete. No one moved. Under the awning, Hux lifted his head. Pain made his voice thin, but hope put steel in it. "Raven," he whispered again, louder, eyes finding her in the gate's shadow. "It's Raven." The word crossed the courtyard and reached ears that did not want it and could not refuse it. Maya let it land. She watched it change posture and hands and breathing. She watched men remember things they'd heard in half-true stories, of land nav in blacked-out forests, of rocks so heavy they made your spine sing, of days where instructors spoke in riddles and nights where the only miracle was getting back on your feet. Delta was not magic. It was memory, of pain endured, of clarity chosen. And these men, even if they'd never been near such a place, recognized the shape of it in the way she stood. A boy with a skull tattoo broke first. He tried a laugh and found it stuck. He reached for bravado and came up with a question instead. "What do we do, Jefe?" he asked Vargas without taking his eyes off Maya. Vargas did not answer. He was remembering his own lines from the afternoon. Water, sun, bones. The script sounded foolish in his head now, a movie in the wrong language. Maya stepped one pace deeper into the light. Not rushing it, not taking more than the room would give. Her gaze touched each face as if she were counting them off for a manifest. She stopped at Hux. For the first time, something like warmth showed in her eyes. "Breathe," she said softly, and the word carried the memory of a radio net coming clear after hard static. He obeyed as if it were oxygen. When she looked back to Vargas, her voice didn't rise. "You made a mistake," she said. "You thought equipment made a soldier. You were wrong." Silence absorbed the words and did not spit them out. The older mercenary shifted his feet, squared his shoulders, and then, so small a motion it almost wasn't, he straightened his spine and dipped his head. Respect, not surrender. Recognition, not fear. Others followed with echoes of the gesture. It wasn't choreography. It was relief. That the story in the laptop had a face, and the face had rules. Soldiers understand rules. Vargas broke the spell by breathing too loud. He tried to smooth his hair with the hand that held the pistol and looked ridiculous. "Take her," he started, but even his men didn't move with conviction. The room was no longer his. Maya didn't press the advantage. She let the balance tip itself. Then she said the smallest thing with the largest consequence. "Night's not done," she said. "Think carefully about what side you're on when morning comes." It landed like a verdict. In the dark beyond the light, someone tapped metal once, a patient, familiar rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Scrape. Every man who mattered heard it and understood that whatever they chose now would be recorded on more than a hard drive. Hux exhaled. His eyes shone. "Raven," he said, steadier, as if saying it made it true twice. Maya let the name be the last sound. She didn't claim it. She didn't have to. The courtyard held its breath. Maya didn't chase the silence. She used it. One slow step back into shadow, one finger to her lips, and then two open hands. "Watch me." The kind of signal soldiers read without language. The older mercenary, boots square, eyes clear, registered it first. He shifted his rifle to low ready and gave a barely there nod. "I see." Across the yard, under the tin awning, Hux's gaze locked to her hand. Maya drew a small square in the air, then sliced a diagonal through it, on my break, and held up 3 fingers, 3 breaths. 3 heartbeats, 3 moves. On one, she pivoted to the hinge line of the gate and slipped a length of torn tarp under the latch. On 2, she angled the tarp so the metal tongue would ride up and over when weight pressed. On 3, she lifted her chin to Hux and the 2 other captives beside him, tired, bruised, not broken, and mouthed down. He slid sideways, dragging his injured arm. The others followed, rolling over a coil of hose toward a stack of crates. A guard started to frown. The older mercenary coughed once, loud enough to draw eyes his way. Maya moved. She crossed the threshold as if the light were hers, hands open, body easy. When the nearest gunman twitched his rifle, she didn't flinch. She looked at him the way an instructor looks at a boot who's about to break a range rule. That look sent his barrel down by reflex. He didn't know why. He just obeyed. "Keys," she said softly. The interrogator's scarred brow, old instincts, hesitated a fraction too long. Maya stepped closer, palm up. He placed the ring there, because somewhere in his bones, a sergeant from 20 years ago still gave orders through calm. She walked the keys to Hux, slid one into his wrist lock, and twisted. The cuff snapped open. Hux sucked air like a drowning man breaking surface. "On me," she said. 2 words, steady as a metronome. A guard lurched forward, unsure whether to stop her or ask permission. Another guard raised his weapon a hair and realized his hands were shaking. Then the hinge popped. The tarp guide did its job. The gate tongue rode up, scraped, and dropped free. Wind pushed the gate 3 inches inward. In that small movement, every man in the yard heard a door open that no one had touched. Maya pointed to the dark mouth of the storage shed, then to 2 shapes, captives. Inside, a Navy linguist with a split lip and a Mexican freelance medic pressed flat to the floor. Her fingers traced a path, shed to crates, crates to the gate to the east cut where the mesquite grove swallowed sound. Hux nodded. He tugged the linguist to his feet with his good hand. The medic steadied him. Maya raised 2 fingers at the older mercenary. He made the tiniest circle with his wrist. "I will hold them." The first shout came from the far wall. Panic, not plan. A young gunman had finally named what his stomach already knew. "La Fantasma," he breathed. "The ghost." He jerked his rifle up. Maya didn't rush him. She stepped left into the hard light, letting the glare bounce off her wrists' wraps like pale flags. "Don't," she said. It wasn't a threat. It was a rule. Something in the room settled. You could feel it, the way a range goes quiet when a range master steps behind you. Even men who didn't understand the words understood the tone. Hux and the others slid to the crates. The older mercenary eased 1 boot forward, screening them with his body. He wasn't switching sides. He was switching to a code older than Cruz: "Don't shoot the unarmed." Maya flicked her eyes to the gate. In the gap, she could see the eastern desert silver gray under moon, the faint rise of the ridge that would hide them from headlights. "Now," she said. Hux moved first. The linguist followed. The medic brought up the rear, eyes wide with a courage he didn't know he had. Maya stepped into the center of the yard and let attention hook to her. That was the trade. The price of their escape was the weight of every gaze. She carried it without complaint. Vargas finally remembered he wore a pistol. He raised it and found his aim wrong. It wasn't his hand, it was the air. The room refused to line up around him. "Stop!" he shouted, voice cracking. "Stop, or I shoot." The older mercenary turned enough to face him, palms open, rifle still low. He didn't say no. He said, "Think," letting the word ride his eyes instead of his mouth. Vargas wavered. Command was a coat he no longer filled. Maya let the pistol point at her. She watched his chest, not the weapon. She watched his breath, how it shook, how it wanted someone else to tell it what to do. "You can," she said quietly, "or you can fix what you broke when you played soldier." He blinked, thrown by the absence of fear. Somewhere outside the wall, from far off to the north, a low thrum rolled over the desert. Not a truck. Not a bike. A rotor, deep and patient. Then another. What her signal had started, patience had brought home. Every head tipped a degree toward that sound. A boy dropped his cigarette. Another made the sign of the cross and pretended he was scratching his neck. Maya lifted her hand. Hold. Not a command for the cartel. A promise to her own, almost. Hux and the 2 others reached the gate. The medic pushed, the latch rode, and the gap widened like a mouth choosing to swallow them whole. They slipped out, bodies bent, swallowed by bushes and dark. The first muzzle flash cut the night from the west wall, an undisciplined shot into empty. Another guard answered with panic. Bullets chewed concrete and screamed off corrugated tin. "Down!" Maya snapped, even to the men who weren't hers. Reflex pulled them into cover. She slid left, scooped the fallen cigarette, and pinched its ember against the gate frame. Spark. Thin smoke curled upward when check. It went east, across the path Hux had taken. So she kicked the ember out, stamping heat into dust. She angled toward the shed, grabbed the length of hose, and whipped it against the light switch by the door. Dark. The sudden shadow broke the shooter's rhythm. From the corner of the yard, a figure rose, the older mercenary. He took 2 steps into open space and did something small that became enormous. He removed his cap. Not a crisp U.S. salute. Not even a parade rest formality. Just a man who had once learned that before you speak to an officer you show respect, even if all you have is a battered cap and a spine that remembers when to straighten. He held the cap at his thigh and inclined his head toward Maya. The yard stopped arguing with itself. Another man mirrored him, awkwardly. Then a third. Caps, hands to hearts, backs unbending. Not surrender. Not worship. Recognition. Vargas stared around, pistol drifting lower. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "She is the enemy," the older mercenary answered without turning. "She is a soldier," he said. "And we are not animals." The words settled, heavy and right. Maya didn't acknowledge the gesture with theater. She gave it the only answer that fit. A slight nod. The kind one leader gives another when their worlds meet on the thin line where rules survive. The rotors grew louder. 2 birds, low and deliberate, approaching without searchlights. The courtyard lights flickered. Someone hit a breaker out of habit. The yard dipped to twilight. Out of the corner of her eye, Maya saw a hinge of movement at the far wall. 3 of her own, shapes she knew by the way they ran, slipping through the breach her confusion had bought. She raised her hand. Friendlies, and the older mercenary shifted his stance to block a jittery gunman's line of fire. A fresh shout from the gate. Spanish she didn't need to translate. "They're coming." "Cover," Maya called. Not a second too soon, the northern wall dusted with rotor wash. A Blackhawk shouldered the sky above the compound, doors open, silhouettes braced behind miniguns that stayed mercifully quiet. They didn't need to fire. Presence spoke. A second bird slid to a hover east, the downwash tearing papers from the table and slamming them against concrete. The laptop skittered, the PDA flipped, and the photo labeled Raven slid face up against Vargas's boot. A rope dropped. 2 figures fast roped clean, smooth, like ink drawn down a page. The first hit the ground, scanned and locked eyes with Maya. Rank flashed in the moonlight. 05. He didn't bark. He didn't even speak at first. He stepped forward through the dust and rotor thunder, stopped at arm's length, and saluted. A textbook U.S. salute, sharp and simple, offered to a staff sergeant in torn wraps standing unarmed in a cartel yard. For a heartbeat, every motion in the courtyard froze around that line of respect. A man who owned the sky acknowledging a woman who had owned the ground when it mattered. Maya returned the salute with equal economy. No flourish. No claim. "Raven," the officer said, voice calm through the rotor noise. "You hold this place together?" "I held time," she answered. "They did the rest." Behind her, Hux stumbled back into view, led by the medic and the linguist, all 3 blinking against rotor grit. When Hux saw the salute, something inside him broke and mended at once. His mouth trembled. He put his face in his good hand and wept, quiet, grateful, relieved beyond words. Others followed in their own way. One laughing in disbelief, another standing straighter than his body wanted, a third whispering a prayer he hadn't said in years. On the cartel side, a boy with the skull tattoo lowered his rifle to his toes and stared like a child seeing a storm fall apart without raining. Vargas tried one last scrap of control. He raised his pistol an inch. The older mercenary stepped into his line of fire, not aggressive, just there. He removed the magazine from his own rifle and set both weapon and cap on the ground. "No," he said to Vargas. Enough. The word landed like a gavel. U.S. Operators flowed through the breach in disciplined lines, securing corners, zip-tying guns that no longer wanted to be guns. The dog lay down and put its head on its paws, relieved to be told what to do by people who meant it. The officer turned to Maya again. He didn't ask for a report. He already had it written on the faces around them. Ready to go home, Staff Sergeant? Maya looked at her people first. Hux, pale and smiling. The linguist holding a hand to his ribs and still making a joke with his eyes. The medic shaking, then straightening when she met his gaze. She looked at the older mercenary last. He stood at parade rest over his grounded rifle, staring somewhere 1,000 miles away, in a time when uniforms fit and salutes mattered. Almost, Maya said. One last thing. She walked to where the photo lay by Vargas's boot. She bent, picked it up, and slid it face down. Not a trophy. A door, closing. Then she stepped to Hux and put her palm briefly to his cheek. Breathe, she said, and he did, the way the whole yard finally did. When the team formed to load out, the officer moved first, but he didn't lead the line. He shifted half a step and let Maya take the center just for 10 paces, the distance it takes to turn a courtyard into a memory. The rotors swallowed their shadows and lifted them into night. Below, the men who had mocked fell quiet. Some touched their caps. One or two copied a salute they didn't know how to finish. It wasn't perfect. It was human. Maya didn't look back for long. She glanced once, enough to honor the strange hush that comes when a room learns what respect feels like after laughing at it. Then she faced forward into the slipstream and closed her eyes. They were going home. If this part gave you chills, hit the like and tell us where you felt it strongest. The Blackhawks vanished into the dawn, blades fading to a far-off hum that sounded almost like surf. By the time silence returned, the desert was a wound closing. Inside the field hospital pitched along the border ridge, IV bags hung from poles made of aluminum tubing. The air smelled of antiseptic and burned jet fuel. Maya Torres sat on the edge of a cot, left wrist bandaged, dirt still etched into the lines of her hands. Across from her, Corporal Hux dozed with an oxygen mask tilted crooked, murmuring through dreams. A medic brushed past. Vitals are stable, he said. You're clear for debrief once they finish processing. Maya nodded. She didn't ask for rest. Rest could come later, after the people who hadn't made it were counted and the living had water again. When the satellite phone buzzed, she almost didn't pick it up. Then she saw the caller ID, Lena Torres, Tucson. Hey kid, she said softly. Her sister's voice came small through static. Maya? They told Dad it was classified. I saw the news. Was that you? Maya smiled, cracked lips splitting. Could have been anyone who didn't know when to quit. Lena sniffed a laugh that turned into a sob. You always said the desert listens to the stubborn. It does, Maya whispered. Still here. They didn't speak about the firefight or the dead. They spoke about breakfast plans, about the stray cat that kept sleeping on Lena's porch, about small things that sounded like mercy. When the line clicked dead, Maya sat holding the silent receiver until her pulse matched the rhythm of its dial tone. The command tent was half lit, its canvas flapping against a rising wind. A colonel in dusty fatigues looked up from a tablet as Maya entered. He gestured to the single chair across the folding table. Staff Sergeant Torres, he said, you're being credited with initiating the chain that allowed recovery of 3 U.S. and 2 Allied personnel. You know what that means? She shrugged. It means the team came home, sir. He studied her. You signaled without comms, improvised rescue coordination, contained escalation. That's beyond procedure. I did what I was trained to do. He tilted his head. Delta doesn't train humility. No, sir, she said. But it teaches you what matters when the noise stops. He set the tablet down and leaned back. Well, Raven, welcome back. The name felt strange in air that wasn't hostile. She gave a half smile. Thank you, sir. That night, under a tarped sky where rotor wash still haunted the dust, Maya walked the perimeter of the temporary camp. Each tent hummed with low voices, medics changing dressings, operators comparing scars, someone laughing too loudly because the alternative was silence. She stopped at the last cot, where Hux lay awake staring at the nylon ceiling. "You sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the sand moving." "That's okay," she said, pulling up a stool. "Means you're listening." He turned his head. "Back there, when they took you, I thought." "Don't," she cut in gently. "You did what you could." He frowned. "You didn't even have a weapon." "I had options," she said. "That's all training is, learning to see the options panic hides." He absorbed that in silence, then managed to grin. "Still calling you Raven?" She shook her head. "Maya's fine. Raven belongs to the people who didn't make it out of training." He nodded, understanding more than he could say. Later, sitting alone beside a portable heater, Maya opened her small notebook, the one she always carried but rarely wrote in. The pages were warped from sweat and dust. On the first blank line she scribbled, "Selection isn't about who survives the hardest day, it's about who stays human after it." She paused, listening to the night settle. Somewhere, a coyote yipped. A guard cleared his throat near the checkpoint. Ordinary sounds. Life sounds. She thought about the young gunman who had dropped his rifle, about the older mercenary who had saluted in the end. She wondered if they'd remember that moment when the desert cooled, or if it would dissolve like mirage. Her instructors used to say Delta built invincible minds. They were wrong. It built human ones, people who could bleed, fear, and still decide right over easy. Morning came gray and windless. The medevac birds lifted the wounded first. Maya stood with her gear bag slung low, watching the sunrise crawl over the dunes she'd crossed on foot. A young airman helping load the stretchers stopped beside her. "Ma'am," he said, "how'd you do it?" "Out there alone?" She glanced at him. "Barely 20. Eyes too clean. I wasn't alone," she said. "I had every instructor who ever yelled at me, every teammate who trusted me, and a sister who'd be angry if I didn't come home." He nodded like it was scripture. When he walked off, Maya looked back once toward the compound's distant ruins. Smoke rose in lazy curls. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter, gratitude measured in breaths still taken. She whispered, almost to the desert itself, "We bring them home." That's all. In the end, that was the truth of Maya Torres. She didn't conquer the desert, she cooperated with it. She didn't defeat her captors, she changed the gravity in the room until violence forgot its place. Courage, she proved, doesn't shout. It endures. It counts steps, studies shadows, makes calm decisions when emotion wants chaos. Real training doesn't create heroes. It teaches ordinary people to act with grace when nothing else will hold. Somewhere tonight, another convoy will roll through the dark, another soldier will make a choice between fear and focus, and someone will remember the story of the quiet woman the cartel left to die who turned silence into strategy. And maybe they'll whisper her call sign, not as myth, but as reminder, because valor isn't loud. It's the heartbeat you keep steady for everyone else. The Sonoran sun that once tried to kill her now burned behind the horizon, a fading reminder of everything she endured. They'd mocked her, stripped her of rank, and left her for dead, but she answered with silence, strategy, and discipline. In the end, even her enemies stood still, caps in hand, when they realized who she truly was. Maya Torres didn't survive because she was invincible. She survived because she was trained, disciplined, and refused to let anyone else define her worth. If you felt that, if her courage reached you tonight, salute in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories. Because these tales keep courage alive, honor the quiet heroes among us, and remind the world what real strength looks like.